Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez Podcast on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. I am your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by painter, oil painter, artist, Kendric Tonn. And right off the bat, when I first started talking to Kendric right before we started recording, and I was trying to ask, what do you like to go by? And I decided we're going to do oil painter, et cetera, and artist. And Kendrick, you said you had a little issue with going by artist. What is that? What's the issue with going by artist that you have?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it a moral objection, but it's one of those, it's kind of a common, I don't know, hang up of people in the classical painting community, usually something on the order of I'm not going to make that judgment. Artist is too fraught a word. I'm going to describe myself in a more literalistic sense. I'm a painter, I paint, and we can leave the judgment of who is or is not an artist, either the MFA students or the history.
Hmm. Yeah, with so I mean, we need to be clear. Anybody who's looking for someone to paint their house, this is the wrong episode. I bet it would be very expensive to do an oil to oil paint a room. I'm looking at the room that I'm in right now. I'm like, oh man, that would be something. So as a classical painter, how does that kind of like distinguish you from other kinds of painters?
Well, so I was trained in kind of a classical manner in a very self-consciously 19th century French style at a small atelier in Europe. So I paint in a very realistic representational fashion and very much the what you might call the stereotypical view of an artist, the curvy arm palette and painting the figure under painting the figure from life under these controlled studio conditions. It's in some ways very much like the whole image of the thing.
Um, something I was wondering. I was thinking when I think about like classical, um, artists. I have a brother of mine who just came back from Florence, Italy,
Okay, that's actually I
and
spent 2 years in Florence for
oh
school.
wow, that's great. One of the greatest things that one of my best experiences, especially with art, is that I got to go to Florence for a friend's wedding some years back,
Mhm.
and I got to see the David in the flesh, because it might as well have been flesh because of just how beautiful and sublime and
Mhm.
awestruck I was. And um,
It's
if
bigger than
I
you think it's gonna be, yeah.
it is bigger than you think it's going to be, and the impact it had on me was a lot bigger than I thought it would be. And if I was a person with the means, I could very well see myself, hopping a flight just to go there again, just to spend an afternoon uh, with David. Yeah, what was that like? Studying for 2 years in this magnificent place.
Oh, man, I mean, it was wonderful. It was a fantastic experience, some of the best years I've ever had, though it wasn't, at the same time, I was very may not be I mean, I'll say this to people sometimes, and they'll sort of sigh and look dreamily off and say, "Oh, Florence, I love Florence," and it's like, "Okay, I mean, yes, but it wasn't quite like your Italian vacation." I was very much, buckled down in the studio, in school, in a converted garage in kind of the outskirts of town, painting all day, and of course, I say that, but of course, you're there in the city, you're walking past these things you recognize from the art history books. It's like, okay, there is in fact the Palazzo Vecchio right there on my walk to school. So yeah, and that's how the school ended up being placed there, sort of. The founders of the atelier were looking for something kind of out of the contemporary mainstream of art education, or what you might call contemporary art. So they plunked the school right down in Florence, right down surrounded by these things like the David. And yeah, it was a fantastic 2 years. It was very much focused on the skill learning, but that's what I was there for.
Yeah. And looking at the David, and looking at the other works that like Michelangelo has done, uh, the genius of it to be able to be that genius in so many different media is like because I mean, how many people, like, working today, like yourself, I mean, do you do statues as well as as well as oil painting?
I've dabbled a little bit in sculpture. I'd like to do more, which is fun, and I don't think I'm the worst sculptor on the planet, but I'm certainly, I'm trying to figure out how to put this. Michelangelo's forays into painting were perhaps somewhat more successful than my forays into sculpture,
Mhm.
even grading on a curve. But no, he was really a fantastic multifaceted artist, and even some of the things we tend to forget, like spent the last 10 or 20 years, I don't remember exactly, but the last large chunk of his long life doing St. Peter's, which is, when we think of the big Michelangelo accomplishments, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to come to mind in the same thought as David or the Sistine Chapel ceiling. But of course, it's this massive, extremely visible thing that he did.
Yeah. And yeah, the idea of spending, 20 years on something, nowadays where, it seems like time just ticks by at such a clip. Um, I imagine it would be difficult for an artist to go to, a patron or, some organization who's, raising money and say, so this project's going to take 20 years. I'm going to work 20 years on it, and in 20 years, you're going to see a finished product.
That could be. I don't remember for sure, but I think he was on that architecture project for something like that. I could be wrong, huh?
Mhm. And was he one of the was he patronized by the Medicis? Was he one of those?
Yeah, to some degree, though, of course, a lot of his stuff ended up being through the popes, and I look up which popes did
Mhm.
which every year or so and can never keep them straight, so someone's gonna have to check the Wikipedia article on that.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, a lot of his career, of course, was based in Rome or run through the church in one way or another.
Yeah. Um, so, obviously, Michelangelo is one of the, well-known, masters. For you, who are some of the, some of the others who have, had like the biggest impact in your life as an artist and personal matter and
Oh, man. So it is kind of funny, like, I was saying the school was based in Florence, so this Renaissance, center, but the education, the way I was trained was very deliberately in a 19th century French manner, so a lot of my focus, a lot of my heroes tend to be these 19th century people, more or less academic, shading the Impressionists. So people like, I mean, I was just thinking of Léon Bonnat, who's fantastic, Sargent, so certainly wouldn't call him an academic painter, but he's kind of splitting off of that world. Yeah, Sargent, Alma-Tadema. So these high representational mid to late 19th, early 20th guys.
and with with all the different ages of like the art movement and where you studied, was there you know are there like rivalries, or are the French saying like in a sense, oh, what the Italians are doing a bullshit, we're gonna do something here that's really special or change the world, etc.
That's kind of interesting. I can't really think of the sort of soccer style national rivalries of that sort. At least, when you think of the scope of art history, it more tends to be of a shifting of the center from one place to another. Like the focus moves from Italy to France to London to the UK or something like that. But I don't. Now, of course, you get specific artist rivalries or
Hmm.
opinions in one way or another. There's a famous speaking of Michelangelo, there's a famous story of Michelangelo going to Titian's studio or something like that and looking at his work and just sort of going, "If this guy can't draw, he can't draw at all," which is, certainly would be a bold thing for me to say about Titian, but I suppose when you're Michelangelo, they just let you do it.
Yeah. Well, um yeah, about that, I think, I remember, Steve Martin, who's, comedian and actor and also a collector of art. Yeah, a little nice and a hell of a banjo player as well. Um, and I remember him being interviewed, about how he got into art, and I think he's very much into, like, modern art. And one of the things that he brought up as one of the knocks on modern art is like people look at it and say, "Well, oh, my kid could do that," or show me that you could uh, paint in a classical style first, and then I'll believe that what you're doing is actually uh, with intent, as opposed to you're doing it because you don't have the skill set to do more realistic painting. Is there any what do you think about that? Is there any if you have any thoughts on that?
So
Uh,
I'm going to preface this by saying I do think sometimes the "my kid could do that" criticism is true. Like there are, I'll just use the word modern art. It's maybe not precise, but we'll go with it for ease. There are certainly some modern artists you look at and it's just like there's nothing going on here. However, I don't think that's at all a fair knock against everyone by any means. And I'm not, to be honest, like intimately familiar with the 20th century, more contemporary, more modern guys, but I think a lot of the mid-century big names, like, have gotten in trouble sometimes defending Rothko and Pollock. I think there is really something happening in those paintings that is not esoteric, by which I mean you don't need to write a PhD thesis on it or read the literature to necessarily understand it. It's in a sense facially apparent, but is not obvious as to how it's produced or to how to get there. Rothko, my sort of go-to for Rothko is that they should be understood in a sense as landscapes. Like, you look at them, it's like, oh, okay, we got some squares on the canvas. But I mean, it's a huge canvas. They're big. You should put yourself in front of them, and you should try to imaginatively place yourself in kind of an emotional landscape. I don't want to overly literalize this. Like you're not going. This is a very specific place, but the way he's building these things really produces a kind of emotional or spiritual space you can project yourself into in a way that is not actually that would not be easy to do. Like if you sit down and just slap a couple rectangles on a canvas, you're not going to end up with something you can do that with readily.
mm,
Or like similarly, Jackson Pollock. I mean, I'm a representational guy. I tend to think in terms of space and light. Like Pollock paintings tend to have this sense of depth to them. Like it's this sort of tangle of barbed wire you can project yourself through, which is actually I think I could maybe paint something like a Rothko, like, I sort of understand how that's going down. I would not know how to begin making a drip painting like a Pollock that has that sense of, like, space and depth and atmosphere and form to it. Like, I would not even know how to start.
mm. And with Pollock, there's the not knowing how to start, and then when I look at his stuff, I'm like, when did he know it was finished? You
Yeah,
know, I get it because you have like these massive canvases that are just covered with. I mean, they look just impossibly heavy too. Like I could almost imagine it takes like a muscle bound guys to lift it and hang it and to do the support work of it.
yeah, I believe it, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where to stop's always a question, but at least in my case, it's like, okay, the eyes line up and
Right.
we got news on the canvas. I guess I could call it finished.
Yeah, and I guess with, with a lot of, with artists like Pollock, with, movements like, Cubism and Dadaism, uh, I think what they also have going for them is that they started it. They were the first ones to say, I don't know if Picasso was the first, cubist, but he's the one to say, "I'm going to draw, you know, people this way. I'm going to draw the one famous, painting of his with the prostitutes. It's like, I'm going to draw them this
Mhm,
way, and it's going to shock people on, multiple levels."
mhm. I mean, Picasso will certainly tell you he's the first one to do it. Other people may have their own opinions on the matter.
Um, so with your, with your own painting, I mean, I'm very interested in how you go about the actual, painting, itself and all that. But one of the things that I was interested to talk to you about is just, um, how you view the world as a painter, because I think you probably see the world differently than me. Like, I'm a comedian, I'm a writer. I very much view, what's going on, I guess, in language, or at least the way that I'm going to express what I think is going on, or my thoughts, is going to be, uh, with language. As a visual artist, I don't know, maybe this is like me asking, maybe, perhaps it's like, "Hey, fish, what do you think about the water?" That you swim in. Um, but, as far as like you're going day to day, when you go to the supermarket and you see, it could very well be like a still life all over the place. What's going on in your mind?
I mean, I do think there is a certain the fish water thing may be valid, and there's also a sense in which, to the degree that I'm succeeding in seeing things as a painter, these things are definitionally not susceptible to verbal description. But I can think of a few specific things. I remember relatively early in my art education when I was doing a lot of anatomy study, like attending anatomy lectures and doing crochet drawings and doing a lot of anatomy. I started getting this weird, oh, I don't exactly want to say weird visions. That's going to make it sound a little bit more psychotic than it actually was. But just, walking down the street and like, I'd look at people and sort of dissolve them down past muscle and down to skeletons and then back up again. And it was a really neat, very strong impression of sort of seeing things out in the world that because you know they're there. No, I'm not phrasing this very well, but just seeing new things because you've been engaged in the act of learning about what's there. Or similarly, like I just finished not finished, but I've been doing a long kind of outdoor landscape se- painting project, very focused on color arrangements and big color blocks, and it's made me a lot more aware of the color states of the world around me in very large ways. It's like, okay, yeah, it's evening and everything is very violet, and I am viscerally aware of that in a way that I wasn't. And I think one of the valuable, to me, outcomes of learning to paint, of learning to see, is that you do in fact learn to see. You learn to notice things around you. You become attentive to the rather remarkable mundane phenomena you are constantly surrounded by.
Yeah, and when I was, talking to you, when we were going back and forth over, over messaging, setting this up, I said one of the things I wanted to, perhaps geek out with you about was, the time I studied abroad in Madrid, and I
Mhm,
took an art history course, and one of the coolest things about it was I got to, spend hours and hours and hours in El Museo del Prado, which is, the, uh, uh, huge museum, in Spain, and, I'm so fortunate that I was able to do that, and I've actually been back, since college, and, getting to, look at these, paintings that were there 20 years ago for me to see, and will
mhm,
be there 20 years from now, and many, many years after I'm gone,
Mhm.
And my hope is that there will be other young people especially who will be hit by the experience of seeing some of this stuff. And I one of the things I regret is there was this God, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was one of the Spanish masters or uh, one of the Van Dykes. I forget, but it was a painting of, I think it was Mary Magdalene, and I was just staring at this uh, at this painting for what felt like forever, and it just brought like tears to my eyes. And it
Mhm.
was just one of these things. I was just like, I don't. It's like here I am in the modern world, but yet I can still see paint on a canvas, and it's doing something to me.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we're all hoping for something like that to create that sense of contact with the numinous, whether we
Yeah,
ever get there, I suppose. But we're out there trying.
we are. We are out there trying. Um, there's a really nice, a short documentary that I watched about you on YouTube, and I'll definitely
Mhm.
link to it here. And I think it came out a few years back,
Mm.
and you were working with a model on one of your works.
Mm.
And how do you go about selecting the model that you want to use, and what is that relationship like? Because I think a lot of people who aren't artists, we when I think of like the art class where it's a bunch of people who kind of sit in a circle, and it could be very well some vagrant off the street who needs a few bucks will sit naked for $20 for the hour or however long, and
Mhm.
and people will try to sketch him. So uh, or maybe that's what you do. I don't know. What's it like for you? What's your process?
No, I mean, that's definitely not an unrealistic description of some art classes or open life drawing sessions. Though in my case, more often the models choose me. That sounds really stupid, but nonetheless, like the model I was working with in that documentary was a ballet dancer professionally. It was with the company here in town, and he sent me a message on Instagram or whatever, and was like, "Hey, I I see you paint people. Are you interested in? Are you looking for a model?" And it's like, "Why, in fact, yes, I am." And it sort of goes with the profession. Every ballet dancer I've ever met always ends up doing photo gigs or that sort of thing. Just seems to go with them. And he was great. We worked together pretty consistently for about 2 years until we took a contract with a different company out on the West Coast. And that's fairly, I mean, the specifics will vary from person to person, but that sort of arc is pretty typical. I'll get a message saying, "Yo, you worked with my friend a couple years ago," or "I like your work and I'm in your town. Are you interested in working together?" And there are the extremely banal job considerations. So then sometimes you do find, okay, this person cannot in fact keep a schedule and show up.
Hmm.
But if things work out, I'll generally keep working with someone until it schedules or moving or something like that happens. And it does these things tend to develop into friendships. It is well, first of all, you probably don't do it if we don't get along well. After a couple weeks, it's just like I do not vibe with this. I'm
Couple weeks.
tired.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah. But it tends to it's a very specific social dynamic. On the one hand, the model is kind of stuck and has nothing. On the other hand, I'm working. We talk off and on. It's funny the things that I think there is a little bit of the psychoanalyst room vibe happening. It's funny on, hour 12, we haven't talked for not on one day, but hour 12 or 20 of working together, we haven't said anything for 30 minutes, and then something the model is on his or her mind will just come out and we'll be talking about whatever that is. And yeah, it's a very specific social setting, but it's one I value, and a lot of these people become friends even if we stop working together at some point.
Yeah. Well, I think the relationship between a ballet dancer and the painter is something that just seems so classic. It just seems like you guys are a throwback to a different time.
Does seem a little bit that way now that you mention it.
Yeah, my wife is a trained dancer, and she got me into dance. So she got this comedian bro from Queens, New York, into modern and ballet as well. And one of the things that I kind of turned into a snob, but a snob in a specific way. Not a snob who thinks like, "Ooh, I like going to dance, so I'm better than everybody." I really want more people to experience dance. I think if you're into going to watch NBA games, you should go see dance in the same. Make that a part of your activities. But I became a snob in that I I love seeing beautiful bodies on the stage. Like I love seeing just the dancers, the legs I'm just so jealous of, and the muscles and all that. And I really love seeing beauty, whether it's in dance, whether it's in painting. Yeah, but what I notice is, uh, painting that picture of that painting of the dancer, obviously beautiful body, and it's like, and a part of me is like, oh, I'm so happy that this is being captured, because there will be a day, when he gets a little older,
Mhm,
where he's no longer dancing because their dancers are basically athletes and they will ruin their bodies, for the art.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, so I think what I like when I'm looking at your stuff and, being able the stuff that I've been able to see on your website and all that, I'm like, wow, this is beautiful work.
mhm,
And it's pleasing to the eye where, uh, I've gone to, how many museums, talking about, like, I don't know if it's modern or contemporary. I don't know how you describe it, where I'm looking at stuff and I'm like, I don't like looking at this, and I'm gonna look away and, oh, great, there's a bathroom over there because that's where I have to go to the
mm.
any way to get me away from this stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm certainly gratified to hear that, but that's something I'd like to happen in all of my work, and in a sense, it's obvious when you're working with a 24-year-old ballet dancer in 0.2 percentile physical whatever, like, top of physical shape, like, sure, this is fantastic, but, like, I think you can also do the same thing just through a slow process of attention and trying to enter into some kind of communication with an apple or with a set of power lines against the sky, or really probably with anything. Some things you need to be better at it than others. I mean, in a sense, it's maybe a technical challenge, it's a skills challenge, but it is certainly very obvious, painting that beautiful, perfect condition 24-year-old. But yeah, I mean, part of what I'd like to do in my work is to go out there and really look at things, all sorts of things, and bring that back and put it down and show it to someone else.
Mhm. And you practice what I would call the original selfie, which is self portraits. You have painted yourself, which I believe takes a lot longer than just snapping a picture on your iPhone. With the idea of paying attention and finding new things in an image and in a figure. What is it like when you are painting yourself? Is there like, I don't know, but the equivalent of like, have you ever, tried to start one and you're like, oh, this isn't going to work. I need maybe a week from now. Maybe I lose a few pounds, or I just had a big Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe it's not the best time to start painting myself.
No, well, never for that specific reason. Though certainly I've tried to start a million different things, self portraits included, that just haven't gone anywhere. Like, it's not terribly uncommon for me to put down some initial drawing for a painting, and it just sits in the studio for a month until I wipe it off the canvas and start again. But yeah, I mean, self-portraits are you can apply that same kind of slow looking to yourself in a way that is, I would hope, not narcissistic. We can't really talk about self-portraits without talking about the king of self-portraits, that is to say, Rembrandt. And his, if you look at his work, there are really fantastic, his self-portrait work specifically, it's a fantastic long arc of, in my opinion, very, very honest looking with neither narcissism nor self-pity. Like, life was not particularly kind to him as things went along. And, you see this record of the face, not just an aging face, but of a saddened or worn person, but he's really, I don't know how to say it other than he's really looking. He's not defending himself, he's not pitying himself, he's not exalting himself, he's just seeing.
Yeah. I this is a little, I guess, a little off topic or a little tangent, but uh, a, a couple of years ago, a friend of the family, young man, he passed away in his 30s. He suffered from a brain tumor, and eventually it got him. And a year after, was it a year after? Yeah, I believe it was a year after his passing. His friends and family had a celebration for him. Um, as he would want it. He was a very outgoing party guy, and has like a a wonderful wonderful history of partying, maybe a little too much. But when you're looking back, you're like, oh yeah, well he was getting it all in, before he had to go. But one of the things that I noticed was they had which I thought was a great idea. They had a cardboard cutout of him, a like a life size cutout, so you could go and take
Mhm.
pictures with him. But the one thing that stood out was in this cardboard cutout, he was probably around 6'2",
Okay.
but in real life, he was probably around 5'7". And I
Mm.
was like, you know what? I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that you could, make people remember you as being much taller than you were in life. And I might have to uh, follow suit. But it made me think about that because of, discussing like Rembrandt and his depiction of himself being an honest depiction of oneself. Where, I mean, really, I mean, especially if you're a great artist like that, I mean, you could do anything. I mean, he could have made his I mean, I think his mustache was pretty damn good. It could have been even better had he chosen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, certainly not going to put anything beyond Rembrandt's capacity.
Yeah. Some years back, there was a documentary that came out. I don't know if you saw it or heard of it. It's called Tim's Vermeer.
No,
Tim.
I haven't actually watched it. I'm more or less familiar with it.
Yeah. Penn and Teller, the comedy magic act, the duo, have a friend named Tim who is very much a analytical science guy, and he was looking at Vermeer, the painter, and I guess there's this theory that Vermeer used, you know, optics and mirrors and stuff to basically create kind of a mirror reflection of his subject, and then
Yeah.
kind of,
I don't know to
you
what degree it originates with him, but David Hockney certainly popularized it at the
yeah.
minimum. He wrote a book on not just with Vermeer, but wrote a book on that.
Yeah, so, like, using this technology as a way to, to help one paint as opposed to just, like, freehand. And Tim, who isn't an artist at all, uh, made it his goal to recreate a Vermeer from scratch using, this technology, and it took him, I forget how long it took him, and you would think that this is, of course, me, not being, an artist, you would think that the painting would have been a huge thing, but it was really kind of like a small, a small painting, and it took him so many years to get it. And it's a really it's very like triumphant. Uh, the ending is quite triumphant, just knowing that how long it took and everything that he went through. Um, and as far as when it comes to technology, and then here we're talking about like mirrors and those sorts of thing. Oh, if it is true that those are used, I mean, for yourself, like how does that change the end product for you? Does that sully it in a way, or?
No, not necessarily. I'll say that I don't find the strong form of Hockney's thesis, which is basically everyone was doing this, particularly convincing. I remember, so I don't have a picture of it to hand. I remember seeing Tim's Vermeer was a pretty credible stab at it. Um, is it possible, in were individuals doing this? Plausibly, I suppose. I don't think it. I mean, as one of my teachers at one point said to me, something like, "There's no cheating in the arts."
Mhm.
I do think some processes are more likely to produce certain results. I think heavy use of photographic references tend to produce static paintings, which would probably not be the case in a pinhole camera since you're still working with sort of moving life there. Although this is just speculation, I've never tried using one. I think, um, kind of lost my train of thought there. I guess I don't think.
It's
Uh,
It's all right. Well, yeah, so I guess, thing to bring up, and, it's on, I think, everybody's, mind when it comes to, uh, whether it's trucking or the arts or just, looking up information, and it's, the advancement of, artificial intelligence, and, what impact do you think that's having, or, will have on, on the visual arts in particular?
Man, I mean, that's a hard prediction. I would be, and it's a weird, unsettling time. If anything in my process or product was reliant on digital stuff, be that either the painting itself or the distribution or the reproduction, I would be very, very alarmed right now. If I were producing digital illustrations or concept art or doing furry commissions at $100 a pop to be emailed to someone, I would be extremely alarmed right now. Uh, which is not meant to be pejorative, the AI stuff, just that I think it is probably already eating a lot of people's lunches, and it's going to be getting its hands on a lot more lunches. I don't, I mean, talking a little bit more about process, I do think, and going back to the figure paintings like I do think that the slowness, these long hours in the studio with someone, in a sense, show up on the canvas. Like the thing that is produced is a record of 40 hours in the studio with someone or however long it takes that you actually can't really get there by taking a photo and working from it. And in a certain degree, that's probably even more the case working with generative stuff. Like I could imagine doing something like saying, "Hey, ChatGPT, generate me a backdrop of a ruined Roman temple,"
Hmm.
and using that in a painting, like probably very valid in a way. Like I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but I think outsourcing that production to the robot is also probably injurious of your own development as an artist. And people have been saying these sorts of things for 3,000 years. and it's probably been true every time. In fact, being able to write things down does mean you can no longer do the things that you learn from having to memorize the entire Iliad. Being able to use power tools does, in fact, take away some of the things you learn from having to hand plane out every data or whatever, which
Mhm,
is not necessary. I mean, which is sort of a raw, brute fact. That doesn't necessarily mean that what comes next is like the ending of The Lord of the Rings. It doesn't necessarily mean that what comes next is worse, but nonetheless, the old thing is passing away.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, with AI, I think of, 3D printing and, obviously 3D printing has done incredible things when it comes to manufacturing. I mean, you're able to manufacture a house. I haven't heard of, say, like a version of 3D printing of oil paintings, because I mean, I'm not gonna say nothing is possible, but it just seems like oil painting would be a really tough, uh, substance to do that with.
I would think so. Part of what I mean, it depends a little bit on how you make your painting, of course, but oil paints have a range of transparencies, which both in the paints themselves and in medium you mix with them and in applications. So to get the same effect as an oil painting, it's not actually just a question of like, okay, what color do we have at point A, B, C, D going down the whole grid? Because the total visual effect is produced by this three-dimensional construct of varying transparencies interacting with each other in varying ways.
Mm,
And well, I'm certainly not it would be a little hubristic of me to say that it would be impossible to get a 3D depth scan and get all of that and somehow print it out, but it strikes me as a very challenging prospect.
mm. So in your work, do you just with your paintings, is it, a one-off and then can you make copies from it? I mean, if you have to make copies of a painting, do you have to get back on your easel and make the copy by hand or prints, or how does that work?
I mean, I don't. They're all one-offs. I do some printmaking, as in the printmaking art form, but I don't make prints of my oil paintings, as in have them scanned and sent to a print shop. Like all of the oils are all originals.
Yeah, because I was wondering about, about that. It's like, oh, here's number, 58, and it's like, and in my mind, I'm like, oh my god, that poor guy's wrist, having to make 50, 60 of these, or what have you. Um,
Yeah, no, I'll sometimes revisit territory for one reason or another, but I won't duplicate an existing painting. Like once it's done and it's out there in the world.
yeah. Um, on X, you have a really, really great thread that I'm definitely going to link to in the description, and everyone should check out. And it's in regards to uh, people out there who are looking to buy artwork, uh, and I think. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it kind of came from someone had posted something about, uh, someone needs to make like $10 million before they start buying artwork or something like that. And thank God you came with a with a very down to earth response to it. But yeah, maybe you could just kind of like walk us
Yeah,
through
so
that.
I think there are kind of two common beliefs, would say common beliefs that I think are both sort of well, one is a misconception, the other one is a some other word. But yeah, one of them is like that original post I remember I was responding to where someone says, you know what, you should have $10 million before you start collecting art. And it's like and I think that's a fair something like that is kind of a fairly common belief because you hear about the top name guys like okay, there is a news
Sotheby's,
story.
yeah,
Yeah, there is a news story about this selling at Sotheby's for $46 million, or there was a news story about okay, this Jeff Koons balloon whatever sold for $30 million, or I have no idea what Jeff Koons is selling for. But okay, so that's sort of your metal anchor. But it's like, yeah, that's not really necessary. You can there are all sorts of there are all sorts of price points available of different of and often work of high quality. You can and part of the I don't know satisfaction of art collecting is not really about that investment mentality. The point is not necessarily to get something that will then go to Sotheby's and get a hammer price of X dollars. It's to go out and look at things and possibly remember the experience of going out and looking at things, paintings in this case, possibly meeting the person who made it. It's very like people who get into art collecting almost inevitably end up forming long-term friendships with the artist. Like you go out to some kid's BFA exhibition and you buy their little landscape for $200, and then you go to their first sort of big boy solo exhibition 4 years later and you buy another landscape for $800, and and you keep up with them and you interact as people and as friends eventually. Like that's been very much my I'm not saying everyone who has ever bought a painting from me has become a personal friend, but on the other hand, uh, absolutely. Like people who I invite to my things and people who invite me to their things, and so you have a sort of continuing story, both linked into pieces you may collect and linked into your personal relationship with the artist.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. That how much of it is the memory of if you're out with your wife in the village and you hop in, you pop into a little pop up gallery and you see something that you love, and you just ate at your favorite restaurant, and you get to kind of relive. It's kind of like a I don't know, like a kind of like a movie romance kind of date night thing. Like what's the perfect date? This is the perfect date. We both, ate at our, favorite restaurant, had our, favorite bottle of wine, bought a piece of art, made out in Washington Square Park, and then went and made love at the, it all comes together.
Oh no, yeah, and this is actually a very realistic scenario, not only in the sense that it happens sometimes, but in the sense that it is actually very plausible to implement for, uh, let's say, amounts of money less than $10 million.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think it sort of goes back to like what I was saying before, how I like to see beauty in the art that I'm looking at, and I think it's sort of like envelope. There's sort of a beautiful aspect to living and having art be a part of that I think is important.
Yeah, and going off of that, I said at the start, kind of rambled on, but I said at the start there were two kind of misconceptions. One was that you need to be extremely rich to do this at all, and the other one that I think is worth mentioning is I think there's a kind of lamentable tendency to wish casting in people with, I'm going to describe it as somewhat conservative aesthetic beliefs, and I don't mean politically conservative. I mean basically looking at architecture or furniture design or painting from, let's say, pre-World War One and thinking, "Oh, we could use a little bit more of that out in the world." And I think there's a lamentable tendency to wish casting among these people to just sort of sigh and look off and say, "Oh, we need more beautiful paintings, or we need more traditional styled housing." And it's like, okay, what are you gonna do about that? Are you in fact going to you have a professional job? You in fact can go out to some kid's show at the cafe and drop $200 on the painting. Like this is something you can actually do something about.
Yeah, I think that is so important because I think that cuts across all of the arts where for the yeah, the if the amount of complaining matched the amount of money being spent,
Mhm.
it would be that would be a pretty good trade-off, you know. But yeah, it happens with, I mean, I've seen it with comedy, like, oh, I'm so tired of, comedians having only this point of view and all that. And it's like, okay, well, have you bought my book? Have you become a paid subscriber on my Substack? Or, it's like, how are you funding the people whose art you want to see more of? Because that's just the reality, going all the way back to, me bringing up the Medicis. It's like, because of the Medicis, because of the church, there's a reason why these, priceless images exist in the world. And, thank goodness that they do, because I think the world would be a lot darker without them. So yeah, go spend 200 bucks, dip into your pocket, go, go to your local, art school. And actually, I mean, you've definitely, um, uh, you got me thinking, like, oh, I got to track down, the local art school in where I am in Jersey, and see if they're, having a show, and see what I can find there.
You're right, yeah, and there's almost, if you're in really any place that's not tiny, there's almost certainly some place. I remember in that thread, I was focusing on kind of smaller scale, less prestigious venues, because the entire point of the thread was that, no, you don't need to be ludicrously wealthy to do this. But yeah, like art schools will tend to have, or really any school with an art program will tend to have shows probably on kind of an academic calendar. You're likely to run into things at end of year or something like that. At the my first show was in Savannah, Georgia, at a little cafe slash chocolate shop that did little art shows. I put up some still lifes and floral paintings I'd been doing and sold a couple of them. Every once in a while I'd get a call from the cafe owners and be like, "Yo, we sold your floral painting. Come in and pick up." I think I was selling them for about $150.
Nice.
And yeah, there's the prices like that are still all around. Mid-size and beyond cities will still have some kind of gallery scene. Things are changing a lot with social media and the internet, even over the past 10 years or whatever, but there's still galleries out there at all ranges you can walk into.
Yeah, when you brought up the cafe, it reminded me, there was a in Los Angeles, a cafe called Rock Paper Cafe, and they used to have an open mic there that I would do, like, sometimes every day of the week. And there was a piece of art, pop art, that was on the wall, and it was it was huge. It was almost took up the entire wall, and it was the wrestler Andre the Giant. So he was painted there, and he was the whole base of the painting was uh, empty beer cans.
Okay.
Um, and I was just thinking about it, because I'm like, "Oh, man, I wanted to buy that." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't I buy that?" "Oh, yeah, because my girlfriend was like, 'There's no way I'm gonna let you buy this, this monstrosity.'" And I think, how, I was, in my, early 30s, still kinda, I guess, a little bit immature, so it kinda worked for me.
Mm,
But looking at it, looking at now, like, I'm a dad of at 43 and married in the suburbs, and I'm like, I don't know where I would place that thing. But but yeah, and then there was one time years back when I was single, where I guess I got tricked into buying a girl's paintings, because I wanted her to go on a date with me. So then
mhm.
when that didn't come to pass, I was stuck with these shitty paintings. So I don't know where they ended up, but hopefully they're in a better, happier place. Uh, yeah. So Kendrick, where are you? Where are you located? How often are you showing your stuff? And how if anyone's interested in seeing your work or possibly buying it, how would they go about that?
So I'm located in Ohio. I had been showing at a gallery here in Columbus for quite a while, but ended up leaving there a couple years ago, and I'm entirely self-represented at this point. Speaking of social media and the internet kind of changing the game. So a lot of I'll sometimes sell to people locally, or have by the studio to look at paintings if they want to. But a lot of my stuff is just going to people who find me on X or on Instagram. Actually, I have a painting to ship to someone from Instagram this afternoon. So The most common answer at this point is seeing the work online and deciding to take a risk on it, and it's always nicer to see these things in person if you can.
Mhm.
This idea where I had a teacher who would say, if I ever make a painting that looks better in a photograph than it does in real life, I'm gonna burn it. Which is I'm sympathetic to the premise, these things are meant to show in the real world, not on your phone screen.
Yeah, I think I was, not a victim or, I was so used to seeing artwork by, Salvador Dali in books. I had a calendar when I was in college, that when I finally got to see some of his work in person, I was like, "Oh my god, you could see the brush strokes." Like, "What?" And
Mm,
yeah, stupidly, blew my mind that, "Oh, this is actually paint. This is,"
yeah.
yeah,
That's going back to Rothko. That's like, I mean, I'm not saying you have to like Rothko, but you should at least stand in front of one of the physical ones before you completely write him off.
no.
Mm.
Nice. So, all right, now everybody has a homework assignment. So go get yourself in front of a Rothko as soon as you can, and check out Kendric Tonn's work online. He is very accessible, and if by any chance you find a painting of his that you want to buy, and you let him know that you saw him on my podcast, that would be pretty cool. I feel like I'm doing a good service for the arts. So,
Mhm.
Kendrick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking.